"You don't belong here." Those 4 words, spoken with venomous disdain at 35,000 feet above Kansas, would destroy a billionaire's life in the next 60 seconds. The American Airlines first-class cabin fell silent as every passenger turned to witness what was about to become the most viral airplane confrontation in social media history. But nobody, not the flight attendants discreetly recording, not the other passengers pulling out their phones, and certainly not the expensively dressed man delivering the insult, could have predicted how catastrophically wrong this moment was about to go. Richard Morrison III, CEO of Morrison Real Estate Empire and heir to a construction fortune worth $2.8 billion, stood in the aisle of Flight 447 from Los Angeles to Kansas City, his Armani suit impeccable, his Rolex Submariner catching the cabin light, his face twisted with the kind of disgust usually reserved for something found on the bottom of. His target sat quiet in seat 2A. Travis Kelce, recently retired NFL superstar, dressed casually in jeans and a simple black t-shirt, reading a paperback book and minding his own business. "I said, 'You don't belong here,'" Morrison repeated, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "First class is for people who contribute something meaningful to society, not entertainers." The word entertainers dripped from his mouth like poison. Travis looked up from his book, a biography of Warren Buffett, though Morrison was too blinded by prejudice to notice, and studied the red-faced man looming over him. At 6'5" and 250 pounds, Travis could have easily stood and physically intimidated the smaller, older man. Instead, he remained seated, his expression calm and curious. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" Travis asked politely. Morrison laughed, a harsh sound that made several passengers wince. "Know each other? Why would I want to know a glorified circus performer? You throw a ball around for a living, while real men build empires, create jobs, shape the economy." He gestured dismissively at Travis's casual attire. "Look at you! No respect for the environment you're in. No understanding of what it means to be in the presence of actual wealth and power." The flight attendant, Jessica Martinez, approached nervously. She recognized both men, Travis Kelce from his football career and countless charity appearances, and Richard Morrison from business magazines and his reputation as one of America's most ruthless real estate developers. "Sir," she said to Morrison, "please return to your seat. We're experiencing some turbulence and—" "Don't interrupt me," Morrison snapped, not even looking at. "I'm having a conversation with this athlete about appropriate behavior in civilized society." Travis closed his book carefully, marking his page. Around the cabin, phones were now openly recording. This confrontation was already being live-streamed to thousands of viewers. "Mr. Travis paused, waiting for a name. "Morris. Richard Morrison III. Perhaps you've heard of Morrison Real Estate? We own half the commercial properties in 12 states. We build the stadiums you play your little games in." Travis nodded thoughtfully. "Morrison Real Estate. Yes, I'm familiar with your company." The simple acknowledgement seemed to fuel Morrison's arrogance. He straightened his tie, puffed out his chest. "Finally, some recognition. Maybe now you understand the difference between us. I create lasting value. I employ thousands of people. I shape skylines and transform communities. You caught balls for the entertainment of the masses." "That's an interesting perspective," Travis replied, his voice remaining remarkably calm. "Tell me, how is your company doing these days, Mr. Morrison?" The question caught Morrison off guard. His eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What kind of question is that?" "Just curious about the state of the real estate market, particularly commercial property. Must be challenging times with interest rates and all." Morrison's chest puffed with pride. "Challenging for lesser companies, perhaps. Morrison Real Estate has weathered every economic storm for 3 generations. We're stronger than ever." "That's interesting," Travis said, reaching into his carry-on bag. He pulled out an iPad and began scrolling through what appeared to be financial documents. "Because according to my information, Morrison Real Estate filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection 18 months ago." The color drained from Morrison's face. That's confidential information. How could you possibly? Public record, actually." Travis continued conversationally. "Seems your company had over-leveraged on several major projects. Vegas, Miami, Chicago. When the commercial real estate bubble burst, you were looking at losing everything. TT, Morrison's confident demeanor was cracking. "What's your point?" Travis continued scrolling through his iPad. "My point is that according to these documents, someone stepped in at the last minute. An anonymous investor purchased all your properties in foreclosure through a shell company, kept your business alive, saved your employees' jobs, preserved your family legacy. So what?" Morrison sputtered, though his voice had lost its earlier venom. "That's how business works. Investors see opportunity." "Opportunity?" Travis looked up from his iPad, and for the first time, his expression hardened. "Mr. Morrison, do you know what KLS Holdings stands for?" Morrison's face went completely white. His hands began to tremble. "Kelce Legacy Solutions," Travis said quietly, his voice now carrying a different kind of authority. "That's my investment company, and 18 months ago, KLS Holdings purchased every single one of your properties in foreclosure for $347 million. The first-class cabin had become a tomb. Not a single passenger moved. Even the engines seemed quiet. Which means, Travis continued, standing slowly to his full imposing height, that every dollar you've made since then, every property you've owned, every employee you've provided for, all of it exists because of the glorified circus performer you just spent 5 minutes insulting." Morrison staggered backward, grabbing the seat back for support. That's impossible." "I would have known." "Why would you know?" Travis asked. "The purchase was handled through intermediary, anonymous, just like I wanted it. See, Mr. Morrison, I don't invest in companies to humiliate their CEOs. I do it to save jobs, preserve communities, and help people who are struggling." He stepped closer, and Morrison shrank back further. "But you've presented me with an interesting dilemma," Travis said thoughtfully. "As the majority owner of your company, I technically have the authority to make certain executive decisions." The iPad in Travis's hands now showed detailed financial records, board compositions, and voting structure. Morrison's eyes darted frantically across the screen, seeing his entire life's work laid bare. "I could, for instance, call an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning," Travis mused. "Present evidence of your leadership style. Ask the other board members whether they think someone who publicly humiliates strangers based on prejudice and assumptions represents the values they want associated with their company." Morrison's breathing became labored. His face had gone from white to gray. "Or," Travis continued, "I could simply exercise my majority ownership and restructure the company leadership entirely. Install a CEO who understands that success isn't measured by how much contempt you can show for others, but by how much good you can do with the privileges you've been given." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Every passenger in first class was holding their breath. Then Travis smiled, not with malice, but with something far more dangerous: complete and total control. "But first," he said, settling back into his seat and opening his book, "I think I'll finish this chapter. It's about the importance of humility in business." Richard Morrison III, billionaire CEO, stood frozen in the aisle of Flight 447, finally understanding that he had just picked a fight with the one person in America who could destroy everything he thought he owned. The entertainment was just getting started. The aftermath of Travis's revelation hit the first-class cabin like a shockwave. Richard Morrison remained frozen in the aisle, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, horror, and dawning recognition. Around them, passengers were frantically typing on their phone, uploading videos that were already going viral across social media platforms. Jessica Martinez, the flight attendant, stood paralyzed between her duty to maintain order and her fascination with witnessing what might be the most dramatic airplane confrontation in aviation history. Her hand hovered over the intercom button, unsure whether to call for backup or simply let this corporate Greek tragedy play out. "Sit down, Mr. Morrison," Travis said quietly, not looking up from his book. "You're making the other passengers uncomfortable." Morrison's legs seemed to give out beneath him. He collapsed into the nearest empty seat, his breathing shallow and rapid. The confident businessman who had strutted down the aisle 5 minutes earlier had been replaced by a broken man staring into the abyss of his own destruction. "This can't be happening," Morrison whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "KLS Holding. I researched every major investment firm." "I would have known." "Would you?" Travis asked, finally looking up. "Did you research every shell company, every offshore entity, every legal firm that handled the transaction?" He smiled slightly. "Mr. Morrison, You just admitted you don't know who saved your company. That should have been your first clue about your management style. Dr. Patricia Williams, a psychology professor at Harvard sitting in seat 1C, pulled out her phone and began recording. She had initially intended to document what appeared to be an assault, but this had evolved into something far more fascinating, a real-time case study in power dynamic, hubris, and instant karma. "Excuse me," said a voice from across the aisle. Both men turned to see an elderly gentleman in his 70s, impeccably dressed in a navy blazer with a slight European accent. "I couldn't help but overhear. Mr. Kelce, did you say KLS Holdings purchased Morrison Real Estate's distressed assets?" Travis nodded. "You are. Heinrich Richter, Private Wealth Management." The man extended a business card. "I represent several high-net-worth families in Europe. We've been tracking KLS Holdings for months, trying to identify the principal investor. Your returns have been remarkable." Morrison's head snapped up. "Returns? What return?" Richter consulted his phone. "KLS Holdings has shown consistent annual returns of 23% over the past 5 years. They specialize in distressed asset acquisition, with a focus on job preservation and community development, quite unusual in today's market." He looked at Morrison with thinly veiled disgust. "We had no idea their latest acquisition was Morrison Real Estate. 23%? Morrison's voice cracked. "But that would mean that Mr. Kelce has made approximately $80 million profit from saving your company," Richter finished. "Rather ironic, wouldn't you say? The entertainer you just insulted has generated more wealth from your business than you have." A passenger in seat 3B, a young woman who had been recording the entire exchange, suddenly gasped. "Oh my God," she said, staring at her phone. "This is already trending on Twitter. Kelce owns him, has 50,000 tweets in the last 10 minutes." Morrison buried his face in his hand. "This is a nightmare. This will destroy everything." "Actually," Travis, closing his book and giving Morrison his full attention, "this doesn't have to destroy anything, but it will require something from you that clearly doesn't come naturally." "What?" Morrison looked up desperately. "Humility." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, passengers leaned forward, sensing that this conversation was about to take another dramatic turn. "You see, Mr. Morrison," Travis continued, "when I bought your company, I had my team research every employee, every project, every community impact. Do you know what I found?" Morrison shook his head mutely. "Morrison Real Estate employs 3,400 people directly and supports an estimated 15,000 additional jobs through contractors and suppliers. Your Chicago project alone houses 200 low-income families. Your Miami development includes a community center that serves 1,000 children annually." Travis leaned forward. "Those people matter to me. That's why I saved your company. Not for you, but for them. I don't understand. You built something valuable, Mr. Morrison, but somewhere along the way, you forgot why it was valuable. You started thinking the money was about you, your status, your superiority over others. You forgot that wealth is a responsibility, not a weapon." Dr. Williams found herself taking notes. This wasn't just a business confrontation anymore. It was a master class in ethical leadership being delivered at 35,000 feet. "Here's what's going to happen," Travis said, pulling out his phone. "I'm going to make a choice. I can either call my legal team right now and have you removed as CEO by tomorrow morning, or what?" Morrison whispered. "Or you can make this right, publicly, genuinely, and learn to be the leader your employees deserve." Travis showed his phone screen to Morrison. It displayed a draft email to Morrison Real Estate's board of directors, already written and ready to send. Morrison's eyes widened as he read his own termination letter. "The choice is yours," Travis said, "but choose quickly. We land in Kansas City in 40 minutes, and I have a dinner meeting with some investors who might be very interested in acquiring a real estate company with new management." Morrison stared at the phone, then at Travis, then at the dozen passengers recording every word. The weight of his situation was finally sinking in. He wasn't just facing personal humiliation. He was facing the complete destruction of his family's 3-generation legacy. What would I have to do?" he asked quietly. "First, apologize. To me, to the flight attendant you dismissed, and to every passenger you've made uncomfortable with your arrogance." Morrison nodded reluctant. "Second, when we land, you're going to post a video on your company's social media account. You're going to tell the truth about your company's financial situation, thank the anonymous investor who saved it, and commit to changing your leadership approach. And third? Morrison asked, though he seemed afraid to hear the answer. Travis smiled, and for the first time, it carried a hint of warmth. Third, you're going to prove to me that you deserve a second chance. You have 90 days to show me that Richard Morrison III can become the kind of leader who builds people up instead of tearing them down. The plane shuddered slightly as it began its descent into Kansas City. Captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent. Please return to your seats and prepare for landing. Morrison looked around the cabin at the faces staring at him expectant. His entire future, personal, professional, and familial, hinged on what he said next. The choice was his to make. Richard Morrison III had never apologized to anyone in his adult life. Not to employees he'd fired, not to competitors he'd crushed, not even to his ex-wife during their bitter divorce. The concept was as foreign to him as poverty or failure. Until now, he stood slowly, his legs unsteady, and looked around the first-class cabin. Every eye was on him. Phones were still recording. His next words would be seen by millions of people within hours, dissected by business analysts, and remembered long after he was gone. He began, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat and tried again. I owe several people an apology. Travis watched silent, his finger still hovering over the send button on his phone. The termination email remained one touch away from destroying Morrison's entire world. Mr. Kelce, Morrison continued, forcing himself to look directly at the man he'd just tried to humiliate. I was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. I made assumptions about you based on prejudice and arrogance. You didn't deserve what I said to you. And? Travis prompted quietly. Morrison turned to Jessica Martinez, the flight attendant who was still standing nearby, her eyes wide with disbelief. Miss, I'm sorry for dismissing you and treating you as if you were invisible. That was unacceptable behavior from any passenger, let alone someone who should know better. Jessica nodded, though she remained speechless. Morrison then addressed the entire cabin. To everyone here who witnessed my behavior, I apologize for making your flight uncomfortable and for displaying the kind of conduct that has no place in civilized society. The passengers exchanged glances. Some nodded acceptance. Others continued filming, skeptical of the sincerity of an apology delivered under duress. Dr. Patricia Williams, the Harvard psychology professor, raised her hand. Mr. Morris, may I ask what you learned from this experience? Morrison looked at her for a long moment, then back at Travis. I learned that I've been measuring worth by all the wrong metrics. I thought success meant having the right to look down on others. I thought wealth entitled me to treat people as lesser beings. He paused, his voice growing stronger. I was wrong about what makes someone valuable to society. Heinrich Richter, the European wealth manager, leaned forward. And what about your company, Mr. Morrison? How will this change your leadership approach? This was the crucial question. Morrison could feel Travis's eyes on him, could sense the weight of 3,400 employees' livelihoods hanging in the balance. My company, Morrison began, then stopped. No, that's wrong already. The company that I've been privileged to run, the company that was saved by Mr. Kelce's generosity, will operate differently going forward. He looked directly at Travis. I've been so focused on profit margins and market dominance that I forgot about the human element, the families depending on those jobs, the communities served by our project, the responsibility that comes with the position I hold. Travis's expression remained neutral, but he hadn't sent the email yet. Specifically, Morrison continued, I'm implementing new policies immediately. First, mandatory leadership training for all executives, starting with myself. Second, establishment of an employee advocacy program where workers can report management issues without fear of retaliation. Third, community impact assessments for all new projects to ensure we're building things that actually help, not just generate revenue. A passenger in the back of the cabin called out, what about your attitude toward people you consider beneath you? Morrison winced at the question, but answered honestly, that attitude ends today. I clearly have a lot to learn about respect, humility, and what it means to truly contribute to society. I thought being wealthy made me important. I thought my position gave me the right to judge others. He looked around the cabin. Everyone here has seen how wrong I was. The young woman who had been tracking the Twitter trends looked up from her phone. Mr. Morrison, Radio Kelce, him is trending worldwide now. People are calling for boycotts of your company. How do you respond to that? Morrison's face paled, but he answered steadily. I think those people have every right to hold me accountable. My behavior today represents exactly the kind of corporate arrogance that destroys trust between businesses and the communities they serve. If people choose to boycott Morrison real estate until I prove I've changed, that's a consequence I'll have to accept. Travis finally spoke. And if I gave you a second chance, Mr. Morrison, what would you do with it? I would spend every day proving that you made the right decision. Morrison replied immediately, I would transform our company culture from top to bottom. I would ensure that every employee feels valued and respected. I would make certain that every project we undertake makes communities better, not just our bank accounts bigger. That's a nice speech, said Dr. Williams, but words are easy at 35,000 feet. What guarantees do we have that you'll follow through? Morrison looked at Travis. Mr. Kelce, you mentioned 90 days to prove myself. Would you be willing to make our arrangement public? Let people track my progress? If I fail to meet the standards you set, you can remove me as CEO, and the world will know exactly why. Travis raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we make your probation public knowledge? I'm suggesting transparency, complete transparency, monthly progress reports on the company website, employee satisfaction surveys made public, community impact measurements shared openly. If I'm going to change, let everyone see the process. The cabin buzzed with murmurs. This was unprecedented. A CEO voluntarily submitting to public accountability. Heinrich Richter pulled out his phone. Mr. Morrison, if you're serious about this transformation, my firm would be interested in monitoring the process. We've been looking for investment opportunities in companies with authentic commitment to stakeholder capitalism. You'd consider investing in Morrison Real Estate? Morrison asked, surprised. In a reformed Morrison Real Estate, led by a genuinely reformed Richard Morrison? Possibly. ESG investing, environmental, social, and governance, is increasingly important to our client. A company that demonstrates real cultural change could be very attractive. Travis looked around the cabin, taking in the faces of the passengers who had witnessed this remarkable transformation. The plane was now descending rapidly toward Kansas City, and decision time was approaching. Mr. Morrison, Travis said finally, you've made promises before, to employees you later mistreated, to communities you later ignored, to partners you later betrayed. Why should I believe this time is different? Morrison met his gaze steadily. Because this time, I have nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Because this time, the whole world is watching. And because this time, I finally understand that being a leader means lifting others up, not putting them down. Travis studied him for a long moment, then looked at his phone screen displaying the termination email. The plane touched down on the runway at Kansas City International Airport. Travis's finger moved toward the delete button, but his decision would change everything, not just for Morrison, but for the future of corporate America itself. Travis Kelce deleted the termination email, but as the plane taxied toward the gate at Kansas City International Airport, he made it clear that Richard Morrison's real test was just beginning. 90 days, Travis said, sliding his phone back into his pocket. But there are conditions. Morrison nodded eagerly, sweat still beading on his forehead, despite the cabin's air conditioning. First, you'll have a shadow, Travis continued. Someone from my team will be embedded in your company to monitor every decision, every meeting, every interaction with employees. They'll report directly to me. Understood. Second, every promise you just made gets put in writing and published on your company website within 24 hours. If you fail to implement any of them, our deal is void. Agreed. Third, Travis's voice hardened. If I receive a single credible complaint about you treating any employee, contractor, or business partner with disrespect, you're out immediate. No warning, no second chances. Dr. Patricia Williams, who had been documenting this entire exchange, leaned forward. Mr. Kelce, may I suggest an additional condition? Travis nodded. Monthly all-hands meetings where employees can ask Mr. Morrison direct questions about company direction and leadership decisions. Live streamed, unedited, unscripted. Excellent idea, Travis said. Mr. Morrison? Morrison's face had gone pale again, but he nodded. If that's what it takes. As passengers began gathering their belongings, Jessica Martinez approached Travis. Mr. Kelce, I just wanted to say thank you. I've been a flight attendant for 12 years, and I've dealt with passengers like Mr. Morrison many times. No one has ever stood up for us like that. Travis smiled warmly. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, Jessica. Thank you for handling a difficult situation with such professionalism. The young woman, who had been tracking social media trends, hurried over. Mr. Kelce, the video clips are everywhere. Kelce owns him has over 500,000 tweets now. People are calling you a hero. I'm not a hero, Travis replied. I just believe in holding people accountable for their actions. As they deplaned, Heinrich Richter handed Travis his business card. Mr. Kelce, my firm would very much like to discuss investment opportunities with KLS Holding. What you've built is exactly the kind of principled capitalism our clients want to support. The terminal buzzed with excitement as passengers from Flight 447 shared their stories with friends, family, and anyone willing to listen. By the time Travis reached the baggage claim, news crews were already setting up outside the airport. Morrison hung back, unsure whether to approach Travis or simply disappear into the crowd. But Travis made the decision for him. Mr. Morrison, he called out, walk with me. As they moved through the terminal, Travis spoke quietly. You understand that this isn't just about you anymore, right? Your response to this situation will be studied by business schools, analyzed by corporate governance experts, and watched by millions of people. You have the opportunity to demonstrate what genuine accountability looks like in corporate America. I understand, Morrison replied, and I won't let you down. Don't worry about letting me down, Travis said. Worry about letting down the 3,400 people who depend on your leadership for their livelihoods. Outside the airport, reporters surged forward as Travis emerged. Microphones thrust toward his face, cameras flashed, and questions came rapid fire. Mr. Kelce, can you confirm that you own Morrison Real Estate? What's your response to Mr. Morrison's behavior on the flight? Are you planning to fire him as CEO? Travis raised his hand for quiet. I have a brief statement, then I'll take a few questions. The crowd settled. This afternoon's incident highlights something important about how we treat each other in professional and personal setting. Mr. Morrison displayed the kind of arrogant behavior that has no place in modern business leadership. However, he also demonstrated something equally important, the ability to recognize his mistakes and commit to change. He paused, letting that sink in. I've given Mr. Morrison 90 days to prove that his apology was genuine and that he can transform both his personal conduct and his company's culture. This process will be completely transparent, with regular public updates on his progress. A reporter called out, "What happens if he fails?" Then Morrison Real Estate will get new leadership. Travis answered simply, "Are you sending a message to other corporate executives?" Travis considered the question carefully. "I'm sending a message to everyone. Wealth and position don't give you the right to treat others poorly. And when you do treat others poorly, there should be consequences, real consequences." Morrison stood slightly behind Travis, watching this masterclass in crisis communication. He realized he was witnessing the kind of leadership he had never learned, principled, clear, and focused on accountability rather than image management. After the brief press conference, Travis and Morrison found themselves alone in Travis's waiting car. "The hardest part starts now," Travis said, as they drove through Kansas City traffic. "Today was about words. The next 90 days are about action." "I know," Morrison replied. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why did you save my company?" "Really? You could have let us fail and bought the assets for even less money." Travis was quiet for a moment. "Because I met your head of facilities management, Maria Santos." "Do you know Maria?" Morrison looked confused. Maybe. We have a lot of employees." "Maria's been with your company for 15 years. She started as a janitor and worked her way up to managing building operations for your entire Midwest division. She has 2 kids, both in college, both studying engineering. When your company was going under, she came to work every day not knowing if she'd have a job the next week. But she kept those buildings running perfectly because she takes pride in her work." Travis looked directly at Morrison. "I didn't save your company for you, Mr. Morrison. I saved it for Maria Santos and the 3,399 other people like her who deserved better than watching their livelihoods disappear because their CEO made bad financial decisions. Morrison was quiet for the rest of the ride. That evening, Morrison sat in his hotel room staring at his laptop screen. The cursor blinked in the empty document where he was supposed to write his public statement. Outside his window, Kansas City sparkled in the darkness, a city full of people who would soon judge whether his transformation was real or just another corporate performance. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. "Sir, the board wants an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Also, your son called. He saw the video. He wants to talk." Morrison closed his eyes. His son, David, who had barely spoken to him in 3 years after a bitter argument about his father's treatment of employees. His son, who had refused to join the family business because he was ashamed of what it had become. Maybe, Morrison thought, this disaster could become an opportunity for more than just professional redemption. He began typing his statement, and for the first time in years, he found himself writing words he actually meant. The real work was just beginning. 90 days later, Travis Kelce walked through the front doors of Morrison Real Estate's Chicago headquarters for the first time as the company's acknowledged majority owner. What he found inside would either validate his decision to give Richard Morrison a second chance or confirm his worst fears about corporate culture. The lobby buzzed with activity, but there was something different about the energy. Employees moved with purpose rather than fear. Conversations seemed genuine rather than guarded. Most telling of all, Richard Morrison himself stood at the reception desk, personally greeting the morning shift workers by name. "Good morning, Patricia. How's your daughter's soccer tournament going?" Morrison asked the security guard. "She scored 2 goals yesterday, Mr. Morrison. Thank you for asking." "And James," Morrison turned to a maintenance worker. "Did your wife get good news from the doctor?" "All clear, sir. The surgery was successful. I can't thank you enough for the extended medical leave." Travis watched this exchange with interest. The embed he'd placed in the company, Sarah Kim, a former McKinsey consultant turned organizational behavior specialist, had briefed him weekly on Morrison's progress, but seeing it firsthand was different. "Mr. Kelce," Morrison approached with a smile that seemed genuinely warm rather than calculated. "Welcome to Morrison Real Estate. I'd like to show you what we've accomplished." Over the next 3 hours, Travis toured facilities he technically owned but had never seen. What he discovered was a company in the midst of genuine transformation. In the employee break room, Morrison had installed a leadership feedback wall where workers could post anonymous suggestions and complaints. More importantly, every post had a response within 48 hours, and many had been implemented. "This was Maria Santos's idea," Morrison explained, pointing to a suggestion about improving safety protocols. "She recommended quarterly safety training update. We've implemented it company-wide." Travis noted that Morrison not only knew Maria's name now, but had clearly learned her value to the organization. In the executive conference room, Morrison showed Travis the monthly employee satisfaction surveys, all published publicly on the company website, as promised. The numbers told an impressive story. Job satisfaction up 34%, turnover down 58%, productivity up 22%. But the real measure, Morrison said, pulling up another document, is this. It was a letter from David Morris, Richard's estranged son, formally requesting to join the company's leadership development program. He said he wanted to be part of building something he could be proud of. Morrison explained, his voice thick with emotion. "We're having lunch today. Our first meal together in 3 years." Sarah Kim joined them for the final presentation. "Travis, I'll be honest. I started this assignment expecting to document failure. I thought we'd be removing Mr. Morrison within a month." "What changed your mind?" Travis asked. "Week 3, there was a crisis. A major client was threatening to pull a $50 million contract because of cost overrun. The old Richard Morrison would have blamed subordinate and probably fired someone. Instead, he took full responsibility in a client meeting, presented a detailed remediation plan, and personally absorbed the cost overruns from his own compensation." She pulled up financial documents. "He's reduced his own salary by 40% and redirected that money into employee profit sharing and community development program." Travis raised an eyebrow. "That wasn't one of my requirements." "No," Morrison interjected, "but it was the right thing to do. I spent years taking credit for other people's work and avoiding responsibility for my mistakes. I decided to reverse that completely." The afternoon brought Travis's most important meeting, a live-streamed all-hands company meeting where employees could ask Morrison anything. Travis watched from the back as 300-plus employees gathered in the main conference hall, with hundreds more participating virtually. The questions were tough and direct. "Mr. Morrison," asked a project manager from Miami, "you've made a lot of promises about change. How do we know this isn't just damage control that will fade when the cameras stop rolling?" Morrison's answer was immediate and specific. "Because I've put legal structures in place to prevent backsliding. The board of directors now includes employee representatives. All executive compensation is tied to employee satisfaction metrics. And I've signed an agreement giving Mr. Kelce the right to remove me for any breach of the cultural standards we've established." A facilities worker raised her hand. "I've worked here 8 years, and this is the first all-hands meeting where management actually answered our questions instead of giving speeches. But what happens when profits drop? Will you stick to these principles when times get tough?" "Sarah," Morrison replied, and Travis noted he knew her name. "That's the real test, isn't it? Anyone can be respectful when business is good. I can tell you that this quarter we're facing some challenges with material costs and supply chain delay." My old response would have been to cut worker benefits and demand longer hours. Our new response has been to be transparent about the challenges and ask for everyone's input on solutions. He gestured to a display screen showing financial projections. "Because of suggestions from employees like yourself, we've found efficiency improvements that will save $2.3 million annually while actually improving working conditions." After the meeting, Travis spoke privately with several employees without Morrison present. Their feedback was consistent. The change was real, significant, and sustainable. Maria Santos, the facilities manager whose story had originally motivated Travis's investment, put it best. "Mr. Kelce, I've worked for a lot of bosses in my career. Some were nice, some were terrible, but they all saw us as just costs on a spreadsheet. Mr. Morrison sees us as people now. That's not something you can fake for 90 days. That evening, Travis and Morrison sat in a quiet restaurant in downtown Chicago. The social media storm had largely subsided, though Morrison's transformation had become a case study taught in business schools across the country. "So, what's the verdict?" Morrison asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Travis smiled. "You've exceeded every expectation I had. The question now is, what happens next?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've proven that genuine change is possible. But this can't just be about one company or one CEO. What you've accomplished here needs to be replicated across corporate America." Morrison set down his coffee cup. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we scale this model. Morrison Real Estate becomes the flagship example of stakeholder capitalism done right. We document everything, the processes, the policy, the cultural changes, and we teach other companies how to implement them." Travis pulled out his phone and showed Morrison a series of messages. "I've received over 200 requests from CEOs asking how they can implement similar changes in their organization. Harvard Business School wants to create a case study. The World Economic Forum wants you to speak at their next conference." "Me? Speak at Davos?" Morrison looked incredulous. "Not the old you," Travis clarified. "The new you, the CEO who learned that true leadership means serving others, not yourself." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "Travis, can I tell you something? 3 months ago, I thought success meant having the power to look down on others. I thought wealth entitled me to treat people as disposable. I was wrong about everything that mattered. And now? Now I understand that real success is measured by how many people you lift up, not how many you knock down. Real wealth is the trust and respect of the people who work with you, not just the money in your bank account." Travis nodded. "That's exactly why this model needs to spread. Corporate America is facing a crisis of trust. People have lost faith in business leaders because too many have acted like you used to act. So, what's the next step? We establish the Morrison Kelce Leadership Institute. Your company becomes a teaching laboratory where other executives can see authentic stakeholder capitalism in action. We develop certification programs, mentorship networks, and accountability systems." Morrison's eyes widened. "You'd put your name on something with mine? After what I did to you? Richard, what happened on that plane was the best thing that could have happened to both of us. You learned humility. I learned that redemption is possible even for people who seem irredeemably arrogant. Together, we can prove that business can be a force for good. 6 months later, the Morrison-Kelce Leadership Institute held its first conference in Kansas City, the same city where their story had begun. Over 500 CEOs and executives attended, eager to learn how authentic transformation could save not just individual companies, but restore trust in business leadership itself. Richard Morrison III, once the poster child for corporate arrogance, stood before the assembled leader and began his keynote address with 4 simple words: "You don't belong here." The audience shifted uncomfortably until Morrison smiled. "That's what I said to Travis Kelce on a flight from Los Angeles to Kansas City. Those 4 words nearly destroyed everything I'd built and taught me the most important lesson of my life. True leadership begins with recognizing that everyone belongs, everyone matters, and everyone deserves respect." In the audience, Travis watched with pride as the man who had once embodied everything wrong with corporate culture became an advocate for everything right about authentic leadership. The transformation was complete, but more importantly, it was just the beginning. The revolution in corporate America had found its unlikely champion in a man who had learned that the greatest power lies not in tearing others down, but in building them up. And it all started with 4 words spoken in arrogance that became the foundation for a movement built on humility. The flight from Los Angeles to Kansas City had lasted 3 hours. The transformation it sparked would last forever.